title of this is called Hairy Ghost, and as you're going to notice, there is a Bigfoot with a sheet on its head. And the idea behind this is not that Bigfoot is paranormal entities, but rather people have been mistaking, in some cases, Bigfoot for paranormal entities. Things that go bump in the night. As I just said, Bigfoot sightings are often attributed to other things. A lot of this depends on what the popular urban legends are, what's popular at the time. And to be honest, I've kind of decided after digging through there that the number of misidentified sightings actually outnumbers the actual sightings. And I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, how does this happen? Well, the average length of a sighting is between 2 to 5 seconds, and the sightings occur at night. Usually the Bigfoot's either in motion, or more often, it's usually somebody driving down the road that sees one on the side of the road. Now, I'm going to show you something here, and you're going to have to look at this, and it's going to be the average duration of a sighting. Okay, who saw that?
Saw the eyes.
Okay, that's about how long most sightings last. Let's look at it again. This time I'll give you some more time. There's a dark mass there. Now, somebody sees something like this, they can jump to all sorts of conclusions. It's a werewolf. It's a giant leprechaun. It just kind of depends on the person, their mindset, what they're interested in. Let's look at it in daylight. And the reason we can say that Bigfoot looks like that is we've got witnesses that have seen him and actually had lengthy encounters with him. So, fitting the sightings into a box. We all have a box. This is our worldview. It's based on everything we know and everything we think we know. There's an old saying that 99% of what we think we know may actually be wrong. When you think about it, a lot of our opinions are based upon what people have told us over the years. They're based on things we've heard. And over the years, these can create themselves in our memories back without actually being presented with any evidence. Okay, now when you run across something that's strange, it doesn't fit in your box, you try to fit it in the box based on what your worldview is telling you. You know, you've seen the thing in the woods that I just shown. If you're really into the paranormal, you're liable to think that was a ghost. These are some of the old things that you used to see reported a lot. Hairy demons and goat men in the woods, werewolves, and you used to see a lot of people claiming to see Indians in the woods. But the thing was, these Indians were all supposed to be about 6, 7 foot tall. There were some cases back in New England from the 1880s after the Native Americans had all left the area, where people said that they shot an Indian. And they said the Indian was covered in hair. Now, obviously, not hairy. So, what they shot wasn't an Indian. Now, in recent years, since the 2000s, there's been a lot of paranormal TV shows that have been on the air. Ghost hunters, ghost attacks, ghost secretary, whatever. Now, this has increased our awareness of it, and as a result, a lot of people have become extremely interested in the subject. There's a problem with it. When you got too many TV shows telling you everything's a ghost, you start to believe it. Lots of people have watched the shows, and like I said, a lot of them, when they run into something strange out in the woods, well, it's got to be a ghost. And even seasoned ghost hunters can actually make this mistake. I have a relative that's part of the TAPS, the Ghost Hunters team, their Oklahoma City chapter, and he wandered out into one of our research areas. and he didn't know it. And this area is supposed to be haunted. Well, he's telling me about all this great ghost evidence they've got. He said they heard, the sound of wood hitting wood and mumbling in the woods and rocks being thrown. And finally, I just shook my head and I went, "That wasn't a ghost. You were in one of our research sites." And then he goes, "Well, no, that was ghosts." I went, "No." Well, like I said, a lot of misidentified Bigfoot sightings have occurred because of this. And legend tripping and ghost hunting grew out of this rush of TV shows. Legend tripping is when you get urban legends that grow over time. Usually you got teenagers and college students that get bored on a Saturday night, drive out there to where it's at. Well, sometimes something happens. Well, of course, when it does, they'll run their mouth all over the internet saying, "We saw the ghost. It was big and black, and it ran across the road in front of us." Well, this gets the attention of the ghost hunters. They go out there, and they're bringing out all this equipment, but the problem is their big ghost has already left the area. So you'll get these reports where the ghost hunters go out there, there's nothing going on. They'll say, "Well, it was just an urban legend, there was nothing to it." But the problem was, there probably was something to it. It just wasn't a ghost, it was something biological. It's cleared out. This is a case study that I was involved with. Down in Ada, there's a legend of what they call the Hairy Man ghost. They say it's the ghost of an 8-foot tall mountain man that died. Well, there was a paranormal research group that went down there and they had a seance to summon the spirit, and they were talking about how they had this success. They had rocks being thrown at them. And they were telling me that this was great. And I'm sitting there thinking, this doesn't sound like a ghost. So I went down there a week later, found the melted wax and the chalk markings where they had their seance, and I looked over, and about 15 yards away there's a creek. And they did it right below the dam of a pond on a concrete slab. The pond's having a fish kill, and it's been having a fish kill for several days, so you've got the smell of dead fish wafting off of this thing. So I walked towards that creek, thinking that's where the rocks would have came from. And lo and behold, I find several footprints. The larger ones were 16 inches long, and the smaller ones were 5 inches long. And a pretty clear picture of what actually happened occurs to me. That these people were having a seance, something there was wanting to get to the dead fish and get dinner. And since they couldn't get around them, throw a rock, throw a rock, throw a rock. Wasn't a ghost. Another case study, the ghost referred to as Old Harold in Roman Nose State Park out in western Oklahoma. This one's got some notoriety because it occurs every winter. And this ghost is apparently very hungry because it has a habit of getting into ice chests and stealing food. Again, I don't think that's a ghost. And the people that see Old Harold says it's the ghost of a 8-9 foot tall Indian shaman wearing a bearskin suit. Some of them tend to take rather peculiar forms. This didn't turn out too well. Apparition in the woods. It's usually described as a woman wearing a black or white dress that's so shredded it almost looks like hair. Okay. And sometimes they say it levitates, but most often than not, there's bushes down below, so you're only seeing the upper part of it. You get a 5-second sighting of something white or black running across there, you're liable to think it's something floating. And this is actually a picture, and I can't say the white thing in that picture is Bigfoot. This was taken off a paranormal site from California, but it's worth noting that that was actually taken just a few hundred yards from where a famous Bigfoot incident occurred, referred to as the Redwoods film, where something walked across the road in front of a news crew. Well, it wasn't a news crew, it was a video crew for a certain entertainment venue dragging a dead deer. And again, I can't say that's a Bigfoot, this is something white there. It could be a guy in a sheet, it could be a guy in a hoodie, it could be just a white rock, but I don't think it's a ghost. This, shadow figures in the woods, you hear this one a lot. Seen at night, poor lighting conditions, when you shine a light on them, they have red eye shine, and that's pretty typical of almost all Bigfoot sightings. And this one, it's kind of hard to make out. Wish I had a laser pointer. But this is a picture of a window taken with a cell phone. Let me get over here. And on the computer, there's a dark figure right in here. Now, why did I put this up there? This was taken in Fouke, Arkansas, a place well known for Bigfoot activity. And this was by two girls that were actually getting ready to go deer hunting. They looked out the window and they seen that running by the windows. And one girl said, "Oh, it's just a ghost." The boogeyman ghost, as I like to call it. Again, the giant Indians wearing animal skins, not commonly reported today. Mountain man ghosts, again, that's not commonly reported today. These became really popular in the 1980s after the slasher movies came about. Friday the 13th, Halloween, stuff like that. You'll have people talking about things like the hay woman. 7-foot-tall woman covered with hay. And the story goes that these are usually, giant killers like in the movies. Well, again, I don't think it is. I think it's an extension of this same phenomenon going on. Ghost rider and horse is a popular one here in Oklahoma. People see strange figures on all fours, sometimes something on its back, have red eye shine, be solid black, and usually when seen they run off to the woods. Now the thing is Bigfoot will move on all fours. And most apes, when they're transporting their young, the young will ride on the back. So if you've seen something run across the highway that's jet black, and it's got something riding it, yeah, you're probably going to think it's some kind of demonic horse. Old homesteads and farms, this is the Labadee Mansion in northeast Oklahoma. There's a lot of reports of strange apparitions and animal-human hybrids and stuff like that that pop up in some of these places. Usually they're found by legend trippers, and they call the ghost hunters. Ghost hunters come in a week later and there's nothing there. But the reason I chose the Labadee Mansion, it's actually got a history of this. They say it's haunted by the Cat Man, which is supposed to be a hairy human cat thing. Old cemeteries, we don't know why, but Bigfoot tend to pop up a lot around these old cemeteries. Ghost hunters have actually had a lot of encounters that fall into this category. Most of the time, you see something big and dark coming out of the woods looking at you and turning around and walking back in, it's probably not a ghost. In fact, I recently had a group from Norman that was showing me a photo that they said they had of a ghost. And I'm sitting there looking at the photo and it doesn't look like a ghost, it looks like an ape crossing a cemetery. Crybaby bridges. Who here has heard of the story of the Crybaby Bridge? Raise your hand. It's a popular legend. Now I actually went and mapped all of the Crybaby Bridge locations in the state. And what I found was very interesting. They're always within a quarter mile of a Bigfoot site, without fail. So, given the fact that the Bigfoot wander the creeks, and we've got evidence that these things will sometimes hole up underneath the bridges during bad weather, it seems to me that these two phenomena are probably pretty closely connected. Online sighting databases. With the popularity of ghost sighting and all these ghost shows, there's lots of venues to report them, but when you're looking through them, you got to remember to take them with a grain of salt, because these are reported not as something as you're going to, that like a Bigfoot that might be there once in a while. People are thinking they're ghosts. Things to look for when you dig through these databases: shadow figures in the woods, food being stolen, mumbles, rocks being thrown, screams, howls. All of these, you can easily go to the BFRO's website and look at their database, and you'll see the same stuff on there.
So they're haunted?
Apparently, if you believe the other databases. The benefits of looking, it can help you identify potential new research areas. When you look at this stuff, you may find a spot that's just, well, worth looking into. And a lot of times you can find areas that have stayed off Bigfooters' maps. Reading the reports can fill in gaps in behavior. You might find one of these reports where they're doing something we didn't know they did. It can fill gaps in your current research areas. If you've got sightings of these things and they're in an area nearby one of your research areas, it's definitely worth noting. Digging for sites. There's a bit of an issue with it. Since they're reported as ghosts, there's very little classification. There's very little organization, no dates, no time, no year, because they're assuming these things are going to reappear. Be prepared. You are going to read things that will make you want to go up to this brick wall and hit your head. I read one, and I'll share this one to you because it amazed me. Some people were out by Lake Eufaula in a spot that's supposed to be haunted. They heard a four-wheeler start up, but they couldn't see the lights. Then they heard shotgun blasts. So they assumed that the woods were haunted by ghost rednecks on ghost four-wheelers. And I'm not making this up. This is on one of the websites. And of course, obviously, they went too close to somebody's crop that they didn't want being found. But insufficient data, I mentioned this earlier. There's a lot of times the details are also fairly vague, so you got to kind of got to do a lot of interpreting. Some paranormal researchers and some Bigfoot researchers are guilty of this too. I preach being analytical when you're looking at stuff. Try to figure out what it categorizes as best. But some people will take a report and ignore certain things to make it fit the mold they want it to have. I.e., there's a famous case of a haunting in central Oklahoma where rocks were continually being chunked at this house. And they were so bent, the news was promoting it as ghosts, everybody was promoting it as ghosts. The problem is, one of the cameramen saw a Bigfoot run by his van, and that was ignored, because the ghosts were making the money. Insufficient data. A lot of ghost hunters tend to view activity as paranormal, so they have very different criteria. The data that they're looking for isn't the data that a Bigfooter is looking for. So you got to keep that in mind while you're going through this stuff. Here's some good websites to dig through if you're looking for this kind of information. Ghosts of America is an online database from all 50 states. There is a lot of stuff on there. This is also the one with the ghost four-wheelers. Strange USA, they'll have little listings, and then you'll have a lot of local people entering chat on the bottom, adding information. This is a good one. YourTruthTales.com, there's a lot of interesting stories there. CastleOfGhosts.com, and that one I actually found a sighting in my area that I wasn't aware of. And the next extension, the alien Bigfoot. Same things applying here. As the recent shows like Ancient Aliens and UFO Hunters and stuff like this has popped up, it's becoming more common to report everything in the woods as an alien. Now this seems to be a bit more common in Arkansas than here. Here it's ghosts, in Arkansas it's aliens. Don't know why. These are just some of the shows. And you'll notice a lot of these are on History Channel. Anybody else noticing this? This is a case study from Gather Mountain, Arkansas. There was a deer hunter in a truck driving down the road. And I pulled this one off Mouflon's site, which is one UFO researchers. Anyway, he's driving down the road in his truck and he looks out the side of his window and he sees this huge 10-foot plus gray thing standing there leaning on a tree, and it starts walking towards him. And he claims that he has missing time. Personally, I think he fainted. He came to several minutes later and it was gone. So he reported it as an alien encounter. What I find very interesting about it is just a few weeks later, another deer hunter was in the same area and claimed to see two big gray Bigfoot in almost the exact same area. But you can find the Bigfoot sighting in one spot, and then you can find the ghost or the alien sighting in another. When it seems pretty clearly these were the same things being seen, and the person wanted to see two different things. Winding Stair Mountain. This is actually an older case. This is one where somebody screwed up royally. Winding Stair Mountain is a mountain down in the Kiamichi Mountains, just north of Honobi. And in the 1970s, there were a couple of deer hunters that were sleeping in the bed of their truck. Well, there was a big flash of light, and they get out, and then they see tall, dark, hairy figures running away from the trash cans. And they quickly called the UFO people, which they all reported it as aliens. The problem is the UFO people didn't bother to check to see what was going on in the skies that night. Sure enough, I did a little cross-checking and found out that we had a Leonid meteor shower that same night at the time they reported the sighting that would have been visible in that region. Now, the Leonid meteors tend to explode in bright flashes of light when they enter the atmosphere. So, with that information and the fact that these things were apparently raining trash, I really don't think they were aliens. So, in conclusion, don't be afraid to look into paranormal data to find hidden nuggets that could be useful as a Bigfoot researcher. Like I said, it's there. People just got to look. So, with that, I think I'm about done. And I'm going to make Darren get up after he just sat down.
Well, at least you kept him awake.
Anybody got any questions before Jim goes?
Oh, you want to hear about which one? Okay, I'll tell the werewolf story. Yeah, that's actually a story from my area. We had a guy move out there from, I think he was from Rhode Island or something. But during deer season, the local gas station will sell ammunition. And I was in there actually getting a pizza. And this guy comes in the store as white as a sheet. And he starts asking for all the ammunition we have. And me and the lady behind the counter are trying to get him calmed down. And he goes, well, you wouldn't believe me what happened. Well, go on, tell us, what happened? He said, a werewolf chased me back to my truck. I'm going, a werewolf? And he goes, yeah, looked like the old Wolfman movies. Came out of the woods on all fours and chased me back to the truck. And we both kind of went at the same time. That was probably a Bigfoot. No, it can't be. Bigfoot's not real. Same gas station. There's another story here that's worth telling. Same gas station. We had a kid that moved there from the city that was working there part-time. And I came in to get something to drink. I've been out working out in the yard all day. And I had a Bigfoot cast. And I got to talking with the woman behind the woman at the gas station about it. This kid walks up, well, Bigfoot's not real. And me and Pam, the lady at the gas station, both kind of went, well, you know, anybody that was here in the 80s knows that these things are real. I mean, everybody that's been here for a while has seen one or knows somebody that has. And they went, well, Bigfoot's not real, I would have seen it. I've lived here for 3 years. And I said, oh, they're here. And he just kind of gets this funny look on his face. He goes, they? Well, yeah, there's more than one.
Santa Claus.
And he goes, well, where would something like that hide at? Well, there's a local area we call Hippieville, and it's rumored to be haunted, and it's haunted by the big furry things. And I said, well, Hippieville, that's a good place. No, I don't go there. Well, why don't you go to Hippieville? He just kind of looked around and he said, well, there's too many Satan worshippers out there. And me and Pam just kind of looked at each other and went, no. Oh yeah, there are, I seen them. We were out there one night and we seen them running around the woods. And we were going, okay. He said, yeah, they were wearing black furry jumpsuits. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, go on. Well, they had magic because their eyes glowed when you shone light at them. Uh-huh. And he goes, then they used their weird chance to summon ghosts to throw rocks. Uh-huh. And then we're sitting there listening to this, and he keeps on going. He said, and then we found where they sacrificed a goat. They ripped it open and pulled its liver out. Uh-huh. And he goes on a little bit more, and finally, I go, let me guess, they stunk, didn't they? Well, yeah, smelled like sulfur. And Pam just goes, you do realize those were Bigfoot? He goes, no, that couldn't have been a Bigfoot. And this kid just shorts out. 5 minutes, he's just standing there with a dumbfounded look on his face, realizing that he had seen Bigfoot and never realized it. And this kind of thing is common. So are there any other questions?
Ozarks have a myth, the Ozark Howler.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about it?
Well, I know that some people say it was a joke, but I've heard some stories that were before that joke about it.
Yeah.
But what I heard, it was the screamer.
Well, from what I heard about it is, it was sort of brought over by the Scott-Irish immigrants. You know, they had their hounds and cats of the moors and stuff like that. And if you saw them or heard their scream, you know,
Yeah.
death was knocking at your door. So when they brought it over here, it's something with red eyes and screaming at them from the woods. They automatically thought it was,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, an interesting side note, I found a description of the Banshee's behavior from the year 700 in Scotland and Ireland. And they described the Banshee as sounding like the wail of a hound and a woman screaming combined.
Yes.
And when it doesn't make that noise, it'll hit wood together to make that noise.
The knocking of a coffin.
Yep.
Hey Jim,
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, going back through all the old werewolf fables, if you will, in Scotland, Ireland, England, weren't they just seeing Bigfoot and labeling it as something?
I suspect that was the case. There's actually a sighting from, who's ever heard of the,
What's your other granddaughter's name?
give me a minute here, my brain's not working. The Beast of Gavada.
Great men do war.
Yeah. Some of the sightings on there describe hairy humanoids running around. And what's really interesting is you go to Romania, you know, the traditional birthplace of the werewolf and the vampires. They talk about Vargalovs or werewolves, but when you see what they sketch out as a Vargalov,
If you want to throw a t-shirt.
It's a Bigfoot.
Werewolves, originally, like Romania, the lower steppes of Russia, and
And the statue.
the Russian, the Slavic states of Russia and all that stuff is very well known and possibly have Bigfoot.
and something else I might add, the Bigfoot was probably the origin for the vampire myths because some of the words for vampire, like mulo and stigini, were used interchangeably with Vargalov. In fact, from what I've gathered, the vampire was supposed to basically just be a white werewolf.
We don't have it today, or
I got one more question for you. And that's because it's came up a lot in different places that I'm associated with. The dog man.
A lot of those tend to pop up in areas where there's a lot of the Slavic, Germanic traditions. In central Oklahoma, the Newcastle, Bridge Creek, Wheatland area, there are a lot of German immigrants, and they've been there for a long time.
Somewhere with Big Dick and
Mhm. And the people down there describe seeing werewolves. But the thing is we've got a Bigfoot with a very particular coloration in that county. He's reddish in color. The upper body's lighter in color, like he's older. And I've talked to some of the people that have seen this werewolf in this area, and they're describing this Bigfoot. Well, the werewolf's red in color, and the top of it's lighter. So, I think a lot of this is cultural preconceptions. So, is there any other questions?
My aunt, the older now, she said when she was a little girl, she swears up and down that the hall they lived, there were monkeys running around. She lived about 4 foot tall. Are those supposed to be back?
Could quite easily be my grandfather swore up and down he's seen the little people, which is a common myth in Oklahoma. But when they described them, he said they were about this tall and hairy. So that's, to me, that kind of screams juvenile Bigfoot. I think Darren's getting ready to do some stuff, so I'll defer back to him.